Hello, everyone. This is Meredith with a Y, and I am your host, Meredith Willits. Today, we are going to go deep, changing lives, and I am giving you the keys to the castle. So I'm so excited to have you here today, my dear Shameka. And I'm so excited for the listeners to hear your story and your family's story and where you're coming from and how you got to where you're at today. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
I love it. I'm so excited. And I actually, as everyone knows, I talked to people prior to the recording, and it's so amazing how much your story has stayed with me. And I've been so excited to bring your story to the listeners because I know it's going to stay with them. Because as a white person and for the white listeners, we saw the story of the kid with the hair, you're wrestling, cut it. And we're like, yeah, your hair's long, just cut it. But this is going to give, and your story is going to give a lot more depth to background and what it's really like and what is going on in the corporate world. So please tell us, because you have an event planning, you're an event planner, you're an amazing, entrepreneur, among other things. So what are you doing now? I want everyone to hear.
Sure. And I'm apologize in advance. As you mentioned, I am a events professional,
Mhm.
and I am used to being behind the scenes. Used to being behind the scenes, and I have different equipment that I use for that. So I'm doing some earbuds today. So excuse me if I'm kind of touching and making sure that they're there and in and fine.
Oh, you're so good.
But in terms of what I'm doing right now, I have a company that I own called Catalyst Event Coaching. And essentially, I empower nonprofits and growing companies to execute their events at the intersection of purpose and profit. And so that's done through training, actually, event management, and coaching.
So I misspoke then. Now that you're saying it, I'm remembering. So you're kind of like the coach of the event planners. You're teaching them what to do.
So that is a part of it. And I
Mhm.
actually help companies and nonprofits. So a lot of who I work with currently, because of what's going on with the
Yeah.
pandemic, it's more of nonprofits because if they don't do anything, they may not exist when this
Yeah.
pandemic is over. And so some of them have, they find it necessary to do events right now. Some of the corporations and things like that, of course, they're kind of backing down and slowing down on that. A lot of them don't even have a full workforce right now.
Mhm.
So it's nonprofits that I'm focused on at the moment.
And do you work with nonprofits all over the country? Doesn't matter. We can do it virtually. You'll do any
Absolutely.
kind of event and help them get those going. Now,
Absolutely.
do you so you can work with anyone. So that's
Yes.
exciting.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. But you haven't always done this.
So I actually have been a part of the hospitality industry really all of my life.
Uh-huh. Yeah, right? Yeah.
My father owned a restaurant growing up, and so as a child, I was there trying to help out with that every opportunity I could. They waited till I got of a certain age to allow me to help out a little bit more, so that's always been a part of me. But in terms of me going into this as a career path, I switched gears from my original career, which was supposed to be in engineering, and got exposed to to events through pursuing the engineering career. Oddly enough,
That's
and
funny.
so I
That's a bivouac left. Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. So I went to get a master's in hospitality management and tourism, and came to one of the hospitality capitals in really the world, but
Yeah,
definitely our
right.
country. But when I came down, I did do a lot in the hotel industry. So that's where I've spent a lot of my events career.
And you're in Orlando.
I am.
Okay. And but you, so let's back up. So you're a mom, you're a wife for 8 years.
Yes.
You have a child?
Yes. Yes. I
4-year-old?
have a 4-year-old.
Yes, okay, because I wrote
Yes.
4 years, but I didn't write the word child next to it.
It's like,
And
what's this for?
I know, what's 4 years mean? Your husband is also Black, but he
Yes.
grew up in Germany.
So yes, he didn't grow up all of his childhood in Germany, but there was maybe about 4 or 5 years.
Mhm.
So they were the impressionable years, I would say. So majority of his elementary years were in Germany, and then he came back to the States.
And such a different experience than your
Yes.
experience because you grew up across
I
the
grew up
bridge.
Yes, I grew up in Georgia, so Bible Belt South.
Mhm. Different
So
experience.
very different experience than him, and really different than growing up. I would say where I live now in
Right.
Orlando. Very
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, because I have here, rural Black Georgia,
Yes.
and across the bridge from Selma?
So,
Remind me.
our connection to Selma, anyone that had seen the movie Selma, there's a scene that they talk about the city I'm from. I'm from Albany, Georgia,
Mhm.
originally. So it's Southwest Georgia. So it is a distance from Selma, but the thing that's significant about it is, as far as civil rights is concerned, with the era of Martin Luther King, they actually did come to Albany to try to make some changes and some things happening there. They did not get a lot of traction in
Okay.
Albany. And basically, that's what's referred to in the movie, that they actually learned a lot of lessons in Albany, because our sheriff that was there at the time, he was humane. He didn't just treat people any kind of way. I mean, the laws were the laws, but he didn't treat people any kind of way. So it made it very difficult for them to have
Can't
a
fight
impact of
against.
change.
Yeah, you can't fight against something that's not fighting against you. So interesting. Yeah, right. So, and this is what I think is so we are we become by way of where we've been.
Yes,
And so not only you have the history of the Albany, you have the history of Martin Luther King, you have the history of, I mean, the Deep South, right? Like that's it. But then you also have a family history that also shaped your journey
yes,
and the way that, white people and Black people and like the constructs of, all right, we need to figure this out for our granddaughter, our daughter,
right,
and
right.
help her through this. As I know, and as I've talked about in the series, so many of us do. It doesn't matter what color you are. We are trying to make a better world. We try to make it
Yes,
easier. We try to
yes,
prepare our children for the world that they're going to encounter because we cannot change the world. I mean,
absolutely.
you and I are today. I mean, clearly.
We're
But
trying to make an impact for
we're making
sure.
moving those stones. So, but at the same time, we do the best that we can, as did your parents and grandparents, grandpa, and family, based on what their perspective was, what they had
Absolutely.
to work with. So, your grandfather was a pastor,
Yes.
and how did that play out?
Well, interesting enough, my grandfather was not only a pastor, but he was in the military at one point as well. And so it's a lot that goes along with that. Everybody's probably seen movies where you've seen World War II on up, where people were in the military. If you were Black, a person of color, and you fought in the war and then you came back, and it was totally different treatment than what you
Yeah.
received when you were there. And so my grandfather had similar experiences like anyone else during that time frame. He did not actually fight, thank goodness. By the time he arrived in Germany, the war was over, and so he was on cleanup duty. Is a lot of what they did. So he had a totally different experience than probably those that were in the war because they saw things that were totally different, and interacted with the people more so than those that were fighting. And so that shapes a lot of what he believes in, because even my father, who was drafted for the war, he did not join the military. He was in college, he escaped it, but my grandfather did not help him, give him any assistance of thoughts of how to handle and navigate those waters. And so my dad was being drafted for Vietnam. And essentially, he found out from someone, a white guy, that he was working with in construction, that they would go down and say, I'm in school. And they would try to, repeal the fact of trying to be drafted. My dad was scared for his life. And so he went down there and he was asking my grandparents for support to go with him. They did not. My grandfather just believed that it was his duty to just give up his life that way. And my dad was not
Not having it.
was not really having that. And so he went down there, and obviously he was granted that, but they told him that he had a certain amount of time to complete school. And if he wasn't completed, he was still going to be drafted by that time frame, or of course, if he just didn't stay in school. So my dad pushed out school as long as he could possibly.
Oh my gosh. Right.
So he finished school just in time for the war to actually end and them stop drafting people. So, but outside of that, excuse me, with my grandfather, being a pastor, that was during the era of Martin Luther King. And so being a pastor was very much so associated with that image, and the type of person that Martin Luther King was. So it was assumed that if you were a Black pastor in the Bible Belt South, that you were trying to start up,
An
riots.
instigator.
And
Yeah.
yeah, that's what it was
Yeah.
assumed. And pastors now don't always have to work. Some do, but they don't always have to work. Back then, you needed to work. You didn't live off being a pastor, so you needed to still work. And my grandfather could not find work. He had to come down to Florida, luckily, which wasn't extremely far away. It was about an hour or so away for him to actually find work, because they would not give work to him or any other pastors that were Black in the area.
Because they were worried that he was by way of Martin Luther King, this is what you do and this is what you're trying to do and blah, blah, blah. We don't want to. So he was kind of pushed out of actually earning a living because of being a pastor, even though he had just served his country.
Yes.
And in a quite amazing way. I mean, I'm sure the things that he saw, although different, were just as horrific and traumatizing.
Yes.
And he was one of the guys in Germany, and then he comes back and he's not. Now
Right.
no. And that's what I think is so interesting. And just traveling, I don't know how many listeners or yourself have traveled outside of the country, but the white and Black experience outside of America is so profoundly different than the white and Black experience in America.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that when we talked about like your husband's experience being in Germany and having his formidable years, experiencing being Black
Mm-hmm.
and growing up was so profoundly different than your experience being Black.
Yes.
Same color, same world,
Yes.
but different experience, different energy, and and that's kind of like, it's so interesting because when I look at these things, I'm like, what are we doing wrong? And when I had a conversation with my very first guest, Mijine Williams, we talked about how you're not to touch or even ask to touch a Black woman's hair or skin or any of that. And white people just love to do it. I
Yes.
mean, I don't know what that is, but and I'm telling you, I think it's because we're all dying to have like, amazing hair and we all just don't. And so we're just like, oh God, and we want to be tan and we aren't. So I trust me, it's out of jealousy. But let's be clear on that. As screwed up as it is, and as we're not going to ever do it again, listeners and everyone around the world, that's what it is. So when she was talking to me, what I saw, because I am clairvoyant, I am empathic, I literally stepped inside of the space of, there's an energetic trauma there. There's an energetic memory to being inspected. And literally the words I was told in my head was on the block. And I
Mm,
was like, I don't know where that just came from, but it sounds like it probably is pretty profound. And so the energetic trauma,
mhm.
the energetic experience of emotion that lives inside of people of color in this country is not the same as the energetic transference of energy and emotion and experience as people who did not go through, be passed down, is an ancestor of slaves. Period. And that is what I think there needs to be. That's the reckoning when I hear them talking about, um, what's the word when we pay, restitution?
Reparations.
Thank you. Reparations. My brain couldn't get there. When we talk about the reparations, I look at that as the come to Jesus moment. And I know that there are a lot of people of color that don't look at, we don't need reparations. Let's move on from that and all this stuff. We need an accountability. We need a come to Jesus moment of recognizing and settling that energy once and for all. And until we do that, our country will always be cursed, in my opinion. And I don't mean like in a cursed way.
Right,
I mean
right.
in a energetic way of, because it's never been forgiven and it's never been forgave. It's
Mhm.
never been, I'm sorry, holy shit, this country was built on the backs of African Americans. That we don't find in other countries. We don't find that, you know? And so I really, when I was listening to you talk, over our two conversations now, is I'm able to see that part of, people of color that isn't healed yet. And that's where I think this is getting screwed up, because I always am trying to look at and go, God, how do we get past this? And when you look at people of color in any other country in the world, basically, and they don't have these problems, it only can go back to one thing. I mean, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think that
If I'm wrong, tell me, because I mean, I'm allowed. I mean,
no, no,
please.
I think you're right. I think there is, just like with any trauma
Yeah.
that you experience, any trauma that you experience, you remember it. Sometimes you don't want to remember it, but like you still remember it still affects your daily life,
Yep.
whether you intend for it to or not. And in this case, with African Americans, and I usually call myself Black, but I
Yeah.
do like to reference
Right.
African Americans to try to, give that place setting of what my culture
Where are you from?
and experience
Yeah,
is
exactly.
reflective of. But um, you know, being brought to this country as slaves, that's like generations of things that were taken away from us. And not just during the years of slavery, but even after slavery, where many laws didn't allow us to do a lot of things that the average American could do. And so people don't think about how that affects things like generational wealth and just other just basic things like Black people don't really swim. There's a lot of people that have started to learn to swim. I know how to swim. I'm not a fish, but I know how to swim. My husband doesn't. And those are concepts that came from slavery when we weren't allowed to learn how to
Wow.
swim. And so I live in Florida. My son is going to learn how to swim very early.
It's a matter of life and death. There's a pool in every backyard. Yes, 100%. Yes.
Yes. But it's simple things like that that people don't think about. Something as simple as swimming, that it affected us for generations. And although I know many people that love the beach but still don't know how to swim, and
Yeah.
so it affects what they do when they go to the beach, because there's only so much you can do when you don't know how to swim.
Yeah. And isn't that interesting? Like that memory lives inside of so many people that have no memory as to why. There's
Yes.
no memory. They have no reference point. It's just the way it is.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I am seeing is, your grandfather had all of these traumas sewn into his sinew. It was sewn into his experience and protection and staying alive and trying to, get a job and all of these things. And then your parents, that's one more step, and then you are one more step, and then your
Mhm.
child is one more step.
Mhm.
And working through that trauma, articulating that trauma, being re-traumatized at your job, which
Mhm.
we'll talk about. But this is where I am, is we need to stop traumatizing people. We need to make this better by way of stories and getting personal with people. And so if we can go to that place of when you were graduating school and you were getting your first job and you went home, help me remind me,
Yes. So I have natural hair.
which I
That's
love.
Thank you.
Not that it matters what I like, but I do love it. I'm in heaven. Go ahead.
Yes, and I love your hair too. I've been meaning
Oh,
to tell you the whole time.
oh, you're so sweet.
But when I moved here, I was not natural. However, I grew up with natural hair. Growing up, a lot of people didn't have the whole natural hair thing. It was encouraged at an early age for people to get relaxers or straighten their hair. And in my case, that was not what my parents really pushed or believed in. I couldn't get a relaxer until I was in high school and I played sports. And so I actually kind of desired a relaxer at that particular point because it was hard keeping my hair up because I was getting it pressed. And so either way, fast forward on to other years, when I moved down to Florida, the water was very hard and just doing weird stuff. And I was like, you know what? I don't know what's going on with my scalp. I'm just gonna go natural. I'm not sure if it's chemicals. I don't know what's happening. Let's just do away with this. And this is around the time that there was what I call a natural hair movement that was happening. We weren't really sure if it was gonna like stay around, if it was a fad. It is not a fad. Pretty clear on that. It's not a fad. But at that time, it wasn't at the very beginning, but it was pretty close to the very beginning. And I had just finished graduate school and I was starting to look for a job to get back out in the workforce. And I was talking to my parents about, where I was looking to go, what was I looking to do. And my dad was like, "Are you gonna go with your hair like that? Like what exactly are you gonna do? Because I want you to be able to get a job." And I'm like, what do you okay, well, how am I supposed to have my hair? And so to support me, my mom came up with the idea of, I'll buy you a wig. You don't even have to buy it. I'll buy you a wig. Wear that, get the job. Once you're in the job, you can just, go back to wear your hair however you want to wear your hair.
So just
Um,
get in the door with the
yes.
wig, and then let
Yes.
then let them see who you are, right?
Yes, exactly. That's basically was the point. And so she did. She purchased the wig for me. And I wore it to interviews. And it was a straight wig. It
So how did
was a
that
little
feel?
bob with a bang.
Yeah, I mean, but how did that feel for your mom? Because it sounds like if she was having you to have natural hair for your childhood, that she really embraced
Yes.
African hair and skin and natural, and you're
Yes.
beautiful. And I'm sure, like, knowing who you are now, that
Yes.
all you've accomplished, you have an amazing self-esteem. You were raised by parents who instilled self-esteem, but then there was the pulling back nervousness which is so interesting because they got it they were feeling that.
Right.
Why were they all of a sudden giving into and buying into this you're not it's not going to work out fear?
Right. Right. I really, well, for my dad, like you say, a lot of this just like goes back generations, and with my grandfather not being able to work, um,
Yeah.
my grandmother didn't want them to do a lot of things. She didn't want them to go certain place. She was very protective of them, and I think that's the same thing he was doing to me. He was being protective and hoping that this would not hinder
Right.
any of my potential or progress. Whereas my mom, I don't think she would have come to say that to me. I think she would have just kind of let me do me.
Hmm.
She feels like I can handle myself. That's kind of
Yeah.
like over the years what she's learned. So she's like, even if she thought something, she would just get out the
Right. So this was
but to
probably coming more from your dad's perspective that's
yes,
passed down from grandpa's perspective, which is
yes,
black equals you might have a difficult time getting a job. So because grandpa had a difficult time getting a job because he was black, and so
right.
let's get in line and code switch. I
Absolutely.
mean, is that
Absolutely.
is hair a form of code switching? Because I know code switching is where you
Oh
talk
yes.
different ways. So hair,
Yes,
clothes.
Hair is probably more of code switching than anything else. That's probably
Really?
it's probably one of the number one code switchers, especially for many years. Now, not as much, but for many years, that was one of the number one code switchers. And to your question earlier about my mom, it hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
It hurt my feelings because, and I didn't try to like sit in it
Yeah. Yeah.
hurting my feelings at the
Yeah.
time. I was trying to be strong because in my mind, when you make a choice like that, you already know you're going to get resistance. You already know someone is going to say something you're not going to like or that you don't agree with or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I expected that. And I expected that coming from the Black community as well as other communities. I didn't expect it from my parents, particularly my mom.
Right.
So that's
But
what
again, that
hurt
goes back to
me.
protection too. So
Absolutely.
I'm sure when, and this is going to trivialize it, but I'm going to bring it to the listener. When we do our projects for our kids at school,
Mhm.
we're not trusting their abilities. So we're kind of like jumping on and
Yes.
saving them from their
Yes.
failures and saving them from themselves. And so I'm sure that was your mom just being like, I don't know what else to do. So I'll just do all the bubble letters and just go ahead and, you know
Yes.
what I mean? Like, I'll handle it for you. Like, like we're
I'm gonna
all
do
of
what
us
I
do
can
it.
to protect you. Yes.
Yeah. All of us do it in some weird way, shape, or form, and that was what she knew. And it was probably coming from pressure, like you said, from your dad. And she's just like, all right, I'll just buy the damn wig. Like, let's just get through
Yes.
this.
Yes.
Let's just get you a job.
Let's get the job and let's go on.
Let's move on. And then, so I love it. So you do all your interviews, and then what?
So oddly enough, I was working full time while in
Mhm.
grad school the whole time, and I stayed with the same company. Opportunity came up with the company, and I was like, "I'm gonna stay here. It's been working out great so far, so let's do this."
Right.
So I stayed with my current company. So obviously I didn't have to do a lot of changes to my
Mhm.
hair or anything.
Because you were
Because
natural at this point.
yes, at
So
this
you
point
you
I was
you
natural.
came out of the hair closet, and you
Yes,
showed up as
yes,
yourself. You gave up the wig, and
yes,
everything was fine.
yes, yes,
And now you're getting hired on like a full-time person, and you're still going with that same energy moving forward. I'm going to keep with my
yes,
hair. I like it this way. And what
yes,
happened?
yes. So remember I said I got like a new position.
Mhm.
And this particular new position was at a different hotel. But it was in the same company, and some things had changed in our company a little bit. They had switched up a few of our appearance standards, but nothing for me to worry about, or at least I thought. And so at this point, I shifted my hairstyle to something a little bit more convenient because I was working a lot of
Mm,
hours
mhm.
doing events. You do that.
Yeah, that's like all weekend, nights. There's nothing
Yes.
convenient about events.
Yes. So I switched to a hairstyle that was a little bit more convenient for me that I wore as my go-to hairstyle. And there were no issues. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready to start trying to do something else different. Like I can't just go to this hairstyle all the time. And at this rate, I'm probably gonna like lose my hair because I'm putting tension on it and everything. And so I switched up to a different hairstyle and I was called into HR. And HR basically was trying to find a way to tell me my hair was wild. And I was just kind of like, really like, of all the days you picked today, and it was the one day I had a different hairstyle than what they were used to. If you let me tell it, the other style was probably a little bit more wilder. And this style definitely took more time and effort than the previous style. But it was humid. I live in Orlando, so that happens from time to time. It was humid that day. And so, did the humidity affect it a little bit? Sure, it did. But I don't think it was to a level of, oh my God, what did you do? And it looked like I was unkept.
Right. You were
But that was the
clean. So
conversation.
everyone knows you've been doing a job. They know your performance. They
Yes,
know you're good at this. You
yes,
come in, you're clean, you're tidy, you're
yes.
wearing a uniform at the
No,
time? And
no,
not at this job.
no.
Okay, this job. So you're presentable and all of a sudden HR, your hair's too wild.
Yes. And she really couldn't describe what exactly was wrong with it. The best suggestion that she had to give was, why don't you just go back to wearing it the way it was?
Yesterday. Go back
Yes,
to it yesterday.
yes,
Yesterday was
yes.
bad. We can handle my white self can handle yesterday. My white self cannot handle today. You pushed our
But
limits
let's be
of
clear, the person that had the conversation with me was also a Black woman. So
Oh, Nelly.
and so that was part of my confusion. I'm like, well, I felt like she should have been able to explain to me what exactly was wrong, and she couldn't. Which of course led me to believe that she was forced to have this conversation with me versus her actually having these feelings herself, because
Right.
otherwise I would hope she could express it better.
Right. Because if she had an issue, she'd go, okay, remember how it was smooth here and then poofy?
Exactly.
We like smooth here. So if you can just get back to smooth here, or like
Right.
whatever, like
Right,
she would be
right,
able to, as a Black woman, to describe the process that needs to happen to
right,
get to X, with X being the gold standard of what
right,
hair needs to be.
right.
So what happened?
So I went back to it, but I felt defeated because, mind you, this wasn't my first issue. I had one with my parents, which
Yeah.
I don't count the other issues of the other people of the world that I already know
We're
might
talking
have
about this you
issues,
today.
whatever. Yeah,
Right.
like
This
no,
is what we're here
I'm
to
not.
talk about.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, I had the issue with my parents that hit home for me. Now this is issue number two that's hitting home for me. Because I'm already fighting the hair fight with everybody else in the world. Like, so I'm already in full battle mode. But, now this is like hitting home because this is work. And my work has always spoke for itself. I was always seen in a high regard, and I want to continue having that high regard. And so I'm trying to figure out how to navigate the waters, because at this point I am noticing that my hair tension, the way I've been wearing it, it's now starting to take effect. And I do want to switch it up a little bit. Not to say I wasn't never going to wear that hairstyle again, but I needed to kind of bring in some other things. And just, I was still embracing being natural.
Yeah.
I was still learning my hair. For those that aren't familiar, when you go natural from having a relaxer, many times you cut it off. And so
Mm.
when it's going through those phases of growing out at different lengths, is doing different things. Your curl pattern is different.
I'm dealing with it. I had a
Yes,
mohawk and now
me
I'm growing
too.
it out. Yeah. And so now I'm growing it out. I'm like, what is this? How do I
Yes.
handle these things over here? And
Yes.
like, it's
So
all white and this is yellow. I'm like, and
yes.
literally you're fighting with yourself every morning trying to
Because you're
make
trying
it
to learn
happen.
your hair. You don't know either.
Yeah. And my husband will be like, oh, it looks really good today. I'm like, oh my God, don't say that. Because that means it's never going to do this ever again. You know what I mean? Like, and so
Yes.
I totally hear what you're saying. And so for listeners, when you put a relaxer on your hair, so if I get a perm, it gets big and curly or
Right.
wavy curly. Now they
Right.
have those.
Right.
But if a person of color, a Black woman, gets a relaxer, isn't that kind of the equivalent of a perm, but it makes it straight and smooth?
Right. So it's
Okay.
the opposite.
Opposite, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it makes it straight and smooth. And that's a whole process within itself.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. That's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother podcast.
Yes.
Go watch Chris Rock's hair. You'll understand it.
Yes, please.
Great show to
They
go
do a
watch.
good
You'll
job.
understand so much about Black women's hair. You'll get up to speed.
Yeah, they do a good job.
Yes. So yeah. So then now you're trying to like keep your, because when I'm listening to you, I'm like, that's when you go home and you're like, why can't I just show up as me? Like, what's wrong with me?
Right. And that's exactly what happened. You question you because like at any job, you have appearance standards. They may have something in there that you don't care for, and it might not be a bunch. It may just be one thing, it may just be, I got to wear pantyhose. Ugh.
Right. Right.
But when you have a few things, it's kind of like you're mentally realizing what this job is costing you. Like, am I okay with this? Do I show up as my best self every day with this in mind? How comfortable do I feel? And at this point, I'm not feeling as comfortable because I don't even know the reason for the issue. So I don't even know how to get around it to say, okay, well, I can still be me, but I can still meet what they're asking for by doing this. And I don't really know what they're asking for. And so at this point, I'm getting ready to chalk it up to, it's just me having Black hair and they're not used to what that looks like. And so I did kind of shift over and I changed hairstylists. That was an effort that I made on my behalf to try to hopefully come up with something that could meet in the middle where they liked it, I liked it. So I switched up hairstyles of how I was wearing my hair and the stylist that was doing it. And I changed hotels and ran into another issue. Same company, but different hotel.
Gotcha.
And ran into another issue that I was like, are you kidding me? Because the issue was the way she made it seem when HR had that first conversation with me is it was wild. And so I did more of what we call protective styles that were braided down to my hair, not really loose braids, but they were kind of braided down or at least pinned up so that they look contained.
Right.
For lack of a better term. So that's what I was doing.
When you do the braids that are close to the scalp, that is less pull on the delicate hair. So that allows it to grow a little bit more. How does that work?
So yes and no. It depends on the technique that is used. But some techniques can do that. And it's definitely better for the rest of the hair.
Gotcha.
The edges it depends on the technique if that's good or bad. So you might have to switch it up a little bit, but the rest of the hair, it is good because it's going to stop it from, knotting and things like that, that more of your curly hair ends up doing.
Yeah. And in your mind, you're covered. Every day you wake up.
Yes.
It's handled.
Yes.
I woke up today, my hair is handled. I know what it looks like. It's contained.
Yes.
It's not wild. There's no frizz.
Yes.
I've got this hairstyle under control. You have now officially checked the hair box.
Yes. Yes.
Or so you
can't
thought.
go to the airport because it's full of hairpins. So now now they have to dig all in your hair and everything. So that's a whole nother story.
I mean, I can't. TSA, you need to listen to this. This is not okay. This is not okay. Oh
Yes,
my God.
I went and got my pre-check and clear because to not have to deal with that issue because it's a whole thing. But yes, so I was good. I was good for that until I went to my other property and wore a hairstyle that had a whole nother conversation with a different HR person.
So now you've got the braids. Like now
Yes.
this is box braids. So
No, so this style that I had this particular time was they call them flat twists.
so it's where it's twisted back,
Yes, but
along
it's
a
to
line.
the scalp. It's
Okay.
to the scalp, and so it was basically coming back into a bun
So
in
cute.
the very back of my head. So it's about as professional as you can get while
Right.
having black hair
Right.
and not being straight. It's about as professional as you can get.
Adorable.
And so that's the style that I had, and I felt really comfortable in the style. And I was approached by a visiting HR person that worked out of our corporate office, and basically letting me know that I was outside of appearance standards. And I was like, wait, hold. That was the first time I had the conversation of outside of appearance standards. You know, the rest I knew was subjective, but this time appearance standards came into it, and I am not a rule breaker. And so I
So
was
this
like,
is
what do you mean?
policy. This is policy
So
related.
that's what he's referring to at this.
So
point.
now we have it was a white guy. Yes.
Yes.
And he's talking policy. This isn't opinion. This isn't, hey, this is you're breaking rules
Yes.
with your
And
bun.
so I'm having conversation because this is the first I've heard of this. And like I said, I don't break rules, and I'm one of those people. I read it from top to bottom. I don't skip, and I read it from top to bottom. And I'm like, what rule? Like, where is this? Can you show me in the appearance standards? He couldn't. So let's start there. He couldn't.
Mhm.
What he said to me was that they are in the process of working on a visual appearance standard guide to accompany the written appearance standards. And at this point, we had not been privy to this information or even aware that it was something that they were working on. And so he was telling me based on what they were working on in that document. And I was like, well, you must have a new update that's coming out to the appearance standards as well. But he was like, based on that information, you're outside of appearance standards. You need to take this out of your hair.
Because
That's how he left it.
but wasn't it because there was too many parts?
Well, I ended up investigating later to find out that's what it boiled down to. So essentially, I was able to talk to our VP of HR a little bit later. I don't know, a couple of months, something like that. And I had a conversation with her. Luckily, we had a good relationship. I had a conversation with her, and I said, well, this is what was said to me. I was approached. What exactly is wrong? Because I don't understand. I've seen the pictures. All of the pictures don't exactly match up with the appearance standards. Like, what is really the issue so that I know when I'm going to get my hair done, there isn't any issue when I come to work, because I pay a lot of money to get my hair done.
Because this is no joke, right? It's time, it's money. Now we got to go back to the drawing board. I don't have time to do this after 5 o'clock. Right.
Absolutely. So basically, what she said to me is that if your hair has more than one part,
oh, I can't.
Then anything more than that would actually be a violation of appearance standards. Now, that's not written, or it wasn't written anywhere in the appearance standards, but somewhere along the line, that's what they had deemed appropriate. But it wasn't written anywhere for you to know that. And regardless, it would have been absurd, and I would have tried to fight it. But that was the reasoning that I was provided. And anybody could have more than one part in their hair.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think that has anything to do with color. Anyone can have more than one part. So I was just like, that doesn't make any sense.
But it's so racist.
Yes.
I mean, I want you to understand the gravity of you telling me this story. and how it's lived with me of how, I mean, it's almost like they should have had like the Shameka and Black people rules policy
Yes.
standard, because
Yes.
we're we're making it up right now. We're
Yes.
we're actually we're drawing it up right now, and we're using your hair as the reason and the standard, and this won't affect any of our white colleagues.
Right.
This is racism. This is not even a microaggression. This is a huge aggression towards people of color, Black women, especially, with the braids or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And I want people that are listening to understand how completely racist this is, that if you are not making me comfortable as a white person to look at your body, your skin, your hair, and if that makes me uncomfortable, that's my freaking problem. I mean, and I want to go back to the first kind of property that you were at when they said your hair was too wild. And it's funny because there's that part of me that wants to kind of put it in parentheses and go, but her hair wasn't like wild. She didn't have it like in a full afro and make
Right.
excuses. Okay. But we need to even be careful with that.
Right.
As I've
Right.
learned in my journey of this, is that to say that this is okay, but this is okay, but this isn't okay, and this isn't okay, that's still racist. Okay. And so we need to go, well, hey guys, I want you to know that when she was told that her hair was too wild, it was still what would make you guys comfortable, white
Hmm.
listeners. You would have
Hmm.
still been okay, and you would have still been comfortable, and you wouldn't have walked in the property and gone, oh, wow, look, it's an afro, because that's still racism. That's still using my white definition of appropriateness, my white definition of beauty and what's acceptable and not acceptable, and putting that on someone else. It'd be like the skinny woman that walks in at 112 pounds and wants everyone else to be 112 pounds too. Like, that's not okay. That's not okay. And white women understand that. I don't need to be 112 pounds. I love
Right.
myself, my curvy way. We get that as white women, but we need to go one step further and say, and so is everything else: skin color, eye color, hairstyle, hair clothing, headdresses, hair wraps. I mean, I
Yes.
just had a conversation with a gal recently, and she's like, I was going into something and I had to sit there and pause and go, is this acceptable for me to wear a hair wrap? And she looked fly as hell. Let me tell you what. I mean, it was unbelievable. The jewelry, the whole thing.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, right. But she had to pause and go, am I going to make someone uncomfortable because I'm meeting them for the first time and they don't know me, to then be comfortable with my Blackness? Holy shit. Amen. Right.
Hmm.
And this is what we're talking about. This is racism at its finest in the corporate world,
Yes.
of creating policies on the fly. It's just not okay. And that
And
is,
that's what happens all the time.
I
I,
mean,
I mean, that's just the reality. That's what happens all the time. It's the first time I experienced it head on, because like
yeah.
I said, I'm a rule follower.
Mhm.
So, I've always done what was quote unquote the right thing to do, and try to make everybody feel comfortable. But I did come from a predominantly Black community, so there were a lot more things that were acceptable growing up than maybe here. But it's something that happens all the time, where people make up the rules as they go. It's not written anywhere in most cases. Sometimes some get brave and they will go and change the rules and regulations
Yeah.
to match what they're thinking, but many times it's not. And that's something that is very common that people of color actually deal with.
Yeah. And I mean, like, just to hear your story, it's one of a billion
Hmm.
out there. And that's what I want people to get from today, is that this, I mean, you're so dynamic and wonderful and have that self-esteem piece, but there's a lot of women out there that don't. And when someone does something that's this corporate racism, okay, it messes with them.
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna go a step further
Please.
today. This is not something I normally share, but this is me getting my power. It did mess with me.
Mm.
And to the point what you're saying about me being strong and having high self-esteem, I did. I always had high self-esteem. I was raised that way. There was no reason for me to feel otherwise. And for the first time, I realized that I didn't feel good. I couldn't show up as my best self. And so, although we're having a hair conversation, there was conversations about clothing too, that I feel like had everything to do with my curves. They're my natural curves. I didn't pay anybody for them. I didn't do any of this stuff. But there were conversations about that as well when you could see, and I don't wear a bunch of tight clothes. I don't. Because again, I'm from the Bible Belt South.
Conservative. Cover it up.
But there were still conversations that came up about it. And I remember talking to one of my really good friends who works for one of the most conservative companies out there, and she knows how she's supposed to dress and everything. I'm having conversation with her, and at first she was like, "Well, what did you wear?" Like she's asking me, like, "What in the world? Like, what is
Girl, how'd you show up?"
For a while, she had to realize, because I worked for this company for many years, she had to realize that it wasn't me as an individual, because I was telling her about other scenarios involving other people. So it wasn't just me. And she was like, "What kind of company are you working for?" And I know we're saying that they're racist, but let's be clear, not everyone show up trying to be a racist.
No, unintentional is very, very
So
common. No,
yes,
I think
yes,
unintentional racism is rampant. I think intentional
absolutely.
is not very common, to be
Absolutely.
honest with you. I
Me too.
I really
Me too.
don't. I don't think
Me
people are
too.
running around saying the N-word and doing black jokes. I
Right,
don't.
right,
I think it's
right,
this, we don't really know what's going on inside of us, and we don't really know, we
right.
don't have the wherewithal, which is why I'm doing the series, to understand, no, dude,
Yes,
that's racist.
yes.
It's not okay.
So, with all of that being said, it did affect my self-esteem
Yeah.
for a little while. It took me a while to notice it. I
Yeah.
didn't notice it totally, but what I found myself doing is I had work clothes that I wore nowhere else. They were just work clothes. I refused, even if I was going somewhere that I need to dress up business casual or professional, I had to have another set of clothes, because if I put on those work clothes, like my demeanor would be different. I would feel
Oh.
different.
Oh.
And I start realizing that it was just like that across the board with so much. And I was like, I'm not able to show up as me.
Yeah.
And I had to go back and dig and do a lot of work to get Shameka back.
Right. Oh my gosh. And it's so funny, because I actually just finished a call when I hit, to talk to you today. And she and I were talking about how important it is to be ourself and to be true to ourself, and to stop looking to the left and to the right to find who we are and
Mhm.
if what we're doing is okay. And when we don't be true to ourselves, that is when we see depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, drug use, weight gain, whatever it is, because we're literally fighting a battle of
Yes.
knowing who we are
Yes.
and succumbing to others' bullshit.
Yes.
And when we know who we are and we are not being true to that person by way of clothes, job, makeup, hair, sexuality, whatever it is,
Mhm.
that is when you see a hardening and death. I really, really believe that we die
I
inside.
wholeheartedly agree.
And when we die inside, now you're going to see illness, cancer, heart disease, grief, lungs.
These are all the things that are happening to the Black community.
Yep.
All the things that are happening, and people say it's disproportionate, and They come up with 1,000 reasons why, but these are all the same.
Because they're not showing up as themselves. They're code switching. And I was actually listening to last night a seminar on the anti-Asian violence that's, you know, going on right now, and
Mhm.
how to really be a part of and learn more about that. And it was interesting to listen to Asian women, because a lot of people wouldn't understand that they also do the code switching, where they're nice and quiet
Absolutely.
and polite, and we don't want to cause any waves, but they really want to kill someone in the background because there's violence and we're sexualizing
Right.
Asian women. And we don't really think, because they're considered the good race, the good, polite, math,
People of color.
science,
Yeah.
right? The
Yes.
good
Yes.
people of color, the
Yes.
acceptable people of
Yes.
color. And I didn't even realize I knew I was doing this. I've been racist in that space and I didn't even know it. And now I know, and now I'm panicked. But now you have that come to Jesus. But I'm telling you, a lot of people, I mean, I actually had texted into the group on this call, and I said, "Oh my God." I asked this woman who was doing my nails. I know. And I said, "Where are you from?" But she was speaking an Asian language that I had
Mhm.
never heard before. And she was from
Right.
Mongolia. So it sounded very different. It was a very beautiful but interesting language. I go, "Oh my gosh." And I should have said, "That's a beautiful language. What is it?"
Mhm.
But in my racist ass unknown self, "Where are you from?" Jesus, God, what? Yeah. And P.S. That was like a year ago. So I mean, like, we can make strides. So if you're out there asking people where they're from and talking about Black women's hair, you can be better. Trust me. I've been a disaster before. But these are things that we're all learning. You know, this is stuff that we're finally talking about. Asian women are talking. Stop saying, you know, using me as a sexual whatever. Stop looking at my black hair or skin or whatever
Mhm.
culture or what I'm eating and what I'm doing and whatever. I'm allowed.
Yes.
Screw you. I
Yes.
don't need to code switch. I need to be me, because I'm gonna die if I don't.
Mhm.
And my people are dying because
Yes.
they're not being themselves. We're dying of heart disease rapidly. I promise you. It's because they're not being their true self. It's because they're switching and they're watching their tone,
Mhm.
and they're not being angry, because it makes white people uncomfortable. Ah. And I know I sound like a lunatic to people that are listening that are white. They're like, "Meredith, what are you doing?" And you know what I'm doing? I'm seeing it for the first time in a long time. And I hope that what I'm talking about and what Shameka and I are talking about punches everyone in the face. I hope this punches every HR person in the face, every person that hires and fires and deals with a team and deals with employees or friends or whatever it is, and goes, "Oh my God. We called someone in and did the same thing, and they, you know what? No, it's not okay, because you're killing people. You are." Which we actually kind of have the exact same hair, that's just different. Because look at, I've got my little poofaloop over here, and you've got your poofaloop over here.
Yes. Yes. And I got my gray. I got
And I got my gray too. I'm like all gray in front. I don't even know what's
Yes.
happening.
Yes.
But you
Yes.
know what?
Got my gray.
Your story, your life, your journey, your path, your triumphs and tribulations and struggles. I loved that you were so vulnerable with being treated so poorly by anyone, because that's always really, really difficult to talk about. And I want you to know that I respect you so much for bringing that forward, because I know that it's stories like yours and people bringing their stories to light that, hey, I'm a college graduate. I went to graduate school. I follow rules. I'm doing everything right. And you're still screwing with me. I'm still
Mhm.
not good enough. And if
Mhm.
I'm not good enough, where are we going?
Mhm.
And I want you to know that I know I wasn't in the room that day, but I apologize that you had to go through anything like that. And it's not okay. And that's not who you are. And you are gorgeous. I hope everyone goes to YouTube and sees this beautiful face on this woman. She's going to start being out in front instead of event planning background. And no, but seriously, I want you to know that you're really amazing. And I honor you so much for telling me your story. It's changed my life indefinitely because I am a wacko with my hair. I've had hair like long and short and curly and straight and mohawk and pink and blue. So
Whatever you feel like.
yeah. And you know what I mean? And to me, it's very personal self-expression.
Mhm.
And so I think we need to start expanding our views of what is acceptable and stop going to this conservative, it has to be X. And so thank you so much for coming here today and sharing your story, your life with all of us. I love you forever and ever for this.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate you having these conversations with people and seeking it out. I feel that that's how we're going to get somewhere. We need to have some conversations. Some people may not want to have conversations, but I feel like that's how we're going to get somewhere is, you understanding someone's experience, why they feel the way that they feel, so that you can kind of see things differently,
Yeah.
and we can make different choices.
Better choices. And when you were talking, I have to say this, when you were talking about being a rule follower, I know it's scary to be the Rosa Parks, to be that ball busting woman. And I know that's scary. And at this time it can be dangerous, but to all my Asian listeners out there who are being quiet when they want to yell, and to you, when you want to say, there's nothing wrong with my hair, you
Mhm.
cannot make rules on the fly. We need to look at our 4 women who got us to today and change the world, and know that sometimes we need to get out and yell and scream and say no more, because it's going to be through us changing. We need to sit in the front of the bus and at the lunch counter, and we need to change because of us. We're that powerful and we can do it. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Absolutely. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. And I can't wait to just watch your amazing story go out into the world and let everyone hear. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you for sharing your story. You've been amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you would like to connect on a more personal level, head over to meredithwillits.com or on Instagram at Meredith with a Y for behind the scene footage and outtakes. Please subscribe and come back each week for more Meredith with a Y. Thanks again for listening. Cheers.